Getting somewhere now? Glitchy as hell. I think we seem to be working now. Sorry about You're going to need to do the usual and tell me whether you can hear me or not, because that was, I was just clicking all over the place and it wasn't working. So I feel naked without this little frame. So let's get that back up and see if we can get this show on the road. I'm Jack Chew, 12:30 till 1 o'clock weekdays. We chew it over, or at least we try to. So yeah, tell me whether or not you're getting this. It looks like it's getting through somewhere. Hi, Nichelle, thank you so much for letting me know that you clearly we're coming in loud and clear. Was a glitchy start, I imagine Scarsbrook's meaning. I like that though. I'll go by a glitch. No, Matt, don't correct yourself. I'm a glitchy star. That's what I like to hear. That's nice. Liz Bailey giving a thumbs up as well. Thank you guys for letting me know that it's now working. That was strange, wasn't it? But we're here now. Also, I decided to put this new little caption feature up. So here's a bit of insight into what we're going to be chewing over today. LD at TL. Alistair Beverley. He's joining me in a second. Hopefully we'll bring him in and hopefully it'll be less glitchy than that opening. So my first show of the week on a Wednesday, which is weird. So great show yesterday if you hadn't found it, which is with the First Steps team doing their monthly takeover. They've got a session at Therapy Live as well that you should check out. It's going to be really interesting about their, how much does their undergraduate degree prepare them for practice? I mean, that's a topic that should affect all of us. And so, yeah, do tune in. That's on the MSKR stream. And I really am looking forward to that one. I don't think I'm on to moderate it, so I'm going to need to try and see if I can scoot over there if possible. But another man that's all over Therapy Live is this one, Alistair Beverley. Can you hear me all right, mate?
Yes, I can, Jack. Thanks.
Good. It was a bit of a weird start, that wasn't it? So I'm glad you're here. Thanks for hanging about.
Don't leave me, please, today, Jack. Don't leave me.
Yeah, I always have to say to people, like, if I end up going, then I'd have clicked another button, press refresh, and then Alistair would have had to go solo, which would have been cruel. So there's a few. You're going to be wearing a few hats at Therapy Live this year, which I'm excited for, and it's just the obvious next step in our relationship. So it should just be natural. But I want to talk a bit about your speaking gig first and foremost. What have you got in store for us? Where is it, and why should people join you?
Well, I mean, if you've been living under a rock, you might not have seen some of the promotional videos that have been going on with this sort of streams turf war that we started. I'm quite enjoying getting into, and I have more and more desperate pleas for attention. And Liz Bailey can naff off with that hashtag that that'll be on it exactly at hashtag Team Public Health. So. Oh man, all the fluster. So yeah, I'm going to be looking at learning disabilities and the need for MSK clinicians all round to consider and give people with learning disabilities a thought. Far too many times people with learning disabilities with common MSK conditions and common treatable conditions from healthcare practitioners are passed through to specialist services when their needs could be perfectly met through mainstream health services. It means they have a longer waiting time, things are missed, and ultimately people with learning disabilities end up with poorer health outcomes in the general population. Now, MSK and Therapy Live yourselves are the first sort of cohort of healthcare professionals to feel my wrath. Or should I say, to support to improve our knowledge around supporting people with learning disabilities. But it's a message that we want to take further. It's a message that we want to get out there to nurses and doctors and consultants further down the line.
Because that speaks to something that, on a practical level, I'm interested. I mean, we've spoken about it off air, definitely enough for me to know that we do agree on this tactically. But some would argue that your specialism, there's a reason for it to be considered a niche and to speak to other specialists about it in some ways. And whilst, yes, you want to be doing some outreach, a lot of the educational material needs to be for your really close specialist peers and for that to be where the magic can happen. Your work seems to be trying to nest this conversation in a wider MSK context, in MSK events like Therapy Live, etc. And tactically, you feel that that's the best way to exert your influence. Why do you feel that is?
Because it ain't working. If you look at the stats, 44% of deaths of people with learning disabilities were from preventable healthcare conditions in 2018, 2019. 6 out of 10 people who died during the COVID pandemic had some form of disability, not necessarily a learning disability, but there was a high proportion of people who died with a learning disability. So the current model of healthcare provision of passing it off into niche services and services that are being eroded away, because they are, needs to change. And it needs to change because medically, there's not much different with people with learning disabilities as there is with anybody else. A learning disability is defined as a difficulty taking on new information throughout a lifetime. That's not a medical healthcare diagnosis in of itself, and yet it's associated with so many poor outcomes. So I would agree that because of the nature and complexity of some of the people, that there will be a need for a niche, in the same way that there is a need for an ESP in MSK practice.
Right.
Okay, but doesn't mean that you refer every single person with any sort of, non-specific pain to that ESP or a pain clinic. They are services that would be out of the norm, and commissioned on an extra sort of commissioning basis. And I think a lot of people that I see with common MSK conditions, and we do see them, hence why I've got an interest in MSK, in the sort of the MSKR and the therapy life stuff, because I learn a lot from it as well. And somebody referred the other week, I got an email saying, I just got this referral saying lower back pain, reason for referral, learning disability. So they've not even seen, they've just seen learning disability and gone, passed them straight across. So, and it's not good enough. So that, I could talk for hours about this, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's that kind of, well, I wish we could, but no, we'll keep it to half an hour after that glitchy start, especially. But we've got plenty more chance, no doubt. And you know that your work is certainly it's moved me and many others, not just to support it, but also to think about how we can. This tide rises all ships, right? This is such a great proxy as well for other problems. Like what you've described there is like a failure based on categorical thinking. It's a failure of reasoning. It's an application of recipes, bad pathway management, systemic factors. It's such an example, and in of itself, it is something that warrants and justifies reform. It's an injustice that needs to be corrected for. But then also, the way it is such a classic example of almost similar problems elsewhere that sometimes have their own sort of specific niche things, but the pattern is so similar in that it's like complacency, sense of convenience for the fact that it's just the easier thing to do, the sense that, or the accusation that it's all to do with just systemic issues and that there isn't a competence and individual clinician education that would help with that, right? It's that distributed responsibility thing that we talk about with MSKR. It's like, why is it that some people just have a penchant for saying it's just the system, and then some people it's just clinicians making bad decisions? It's just like, why can't we distribute that responsibility sensibly? And so to see you then work those angles is brilliant, and definitely something that I can't think of a better course to give a platform to. What are the forces that mean that people do sometimes navel gaze in the sort of more LD space? Why is it that then is it that people are pushing you to the silos, or is there a sort of subculture that can exist within the specialism that means that our stuff seems inaccessible, incompatible? What is it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think much as I'm here telling, MSK professionals, you're not good enough, you're not doing enough, you need to do more, I'm also sat here going, LD physios, we're pretty crap. We're not good at promoting what we're doing. We don't talk about our specialism, and we certainly don't play what I believe is our biggest role on the whole. This is not, we do in touch with some good people, but, we don't educate. We don't educate. And that's the whole raison d'etre for me starting up. I know I'm a physio working at a college. I've got a full-time job. I could quite happily fill my time, and a bit like you, Jack, sinking all your time into something that's not necessarily going to give you any payback can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. When you sat there tweeting or making memes late at night, it can sort of think, why are we doing this? But so, I'm putting my neck on the line here and putting my neck out and saying, I want to help educate, and I'm doing that. I'm out at universities lecturing. I'm out there trying to do talks at mainstream practices. I'm linking with people such as yourselves who've got a platform that is listened to UK and worldwide. And this isn't just something that's an issue in the UK. It's a systematic thing that is happening worldwide. So, yeah, you guys, we can do more within MSK practice, but I think there may be, and I've said this before, maybe potential lack of motivation within the subculture, as we call it, of learning disability practitioners. Don't necessarily know why that is, but there just seems to, I get frustrated from what I perceive to be a lack of ambition. That's probably the best way of putting it. But
some of them, I bet there's, to some degree, there'll be some part of it is that this felt like it might have felt a bit inaccessible, or that to some degree MSK practice, for the reasons that you've already mentioned, are sometimes then just, you know, it's hard to probably get motivated if you keep getting punted bad referrals. You know, you just described one earlier where there's almost like you also might understandably perceive that there's a large chunk of MSK professionals that are being dismissive of the people of which you serve. You almost then think, I could rationalize that you almost, it's in the patient's best interest for them to be kept from some of those people that might be otherwise othering them as a label, as a diagnostic label. And so I think it's complex, I guess.
Yeah, diagnostic overshadowing is one of the biggest challenges that we face. And actually, there's been some reports out, something called a leader report, which I refer to all the time. And it showed that diagnostic overshadowing is one of the biggest issues. And that's where people put down somebody's physical presentation to the fact that they have a learning disability. So whether somebody, again, I'm just going to take a few steps back. What makes learning disabilities challenging is the fact that the people find it harder to communicate what they're thinking, feeling, wanting to do. So, you know, we always talk, it's quite funny. I sort of sit here listening to a lot of practitioners on socials going, oh, what's the best way to get a subjective? And what's the, you know, let's look at open-ended questions. And I'm like, I'm working with people here who don't give me anything back. You say, like, how are you feeling today? And you get nothing. So your ability to find information has to be improved. And it takes more time, which is why there's such a thing called reasonable adjustments. You know, but it's a skill that we can learn. We've just finished a 4-week placement with the University of Nottingham students, and in that time, we've seen them go from people who are terrified to engage somebody with a learning disability to, you know, just what part of the team, just cracking on. And I think, again, the best thing that somebody said is, you know, I see a wheelchair now, and I don't think, isn't that a shame? I see the person who's in the wheelchair, a person who's got hopes and dreams. And I think that's one of the most powerful things I can take, rather than any sort of clinical skill that somebody's taken from a placement. I think that is probably the best feedback I've ever had.
It's an interesting barrier, isn't it? And one probably for another day, because me and you, I've got all sorts of shows penciled that I think me and you should do on Chewing It Over together. And even, you know, I know some stuff you visited on your podcast recently about sort of that cultural piece, about the fact that you've got then some people that are just dismissive and don't apply appropriate compassion, but then you've also got this other side, which is that they're then somewhat motivated by seeming compassion, but it ends up being pity. You know, it ends up just being like a there type thing, where they kind of, with this sort of low expectations sort of thing, which it just seems to be sometimes different caricature people, but similar outcomes. Really, is that those emotions are clouding good judgment. One of the things I want to ask is, from my point of view, you as a person and people within your specialty are not typically our target audience as general MSK practitioners for things like Physio Matters, for Therapy Live, more so for Chewing It Over. I hope, you know, I can see that people hopefully get something more from that. We tend to do some bigger picture stuff, and it's kind of so regular that it's varied. But despite that, and despite before we were friends, you seem to be get a lot from some of the stuff we did. What is it that you find as a specialist in your area, that some of the wider MSK conversations, what is it that you take from it? And therefore, what will you be doing at Therapy Live, if, say, as a delegate, although we're going to be keeping you busy with other things, which we'll come to, but if you were to there be as a delegate, what would you be getting from it? And why is it still something that you seem to be to deem relevant?
I mean, it's relevant because I span the entirety of the physiotherapy profession because I'm a specialist. So it's quite funny, but, you know, so people with learning disabilities, because they get referred to people like myself, we get neuro, MSK, we get injuries, we get trauma and orthopedics, we get elderly, you know, you sort of name it. And most people, if they have a learning disability, will be pinged our way. Now, is that good practice? Are we the specialists in those things? No. But you know, you and I have talked at length about the rise of the specialist generalist, and keeping your finger in a lot of different pies. You know, this role here means that I have to make our clinical skills up in a wide variety of different areas, and things like Therapy Live, things like the Physio Matters podcast are fantastic for that. And I shout from the rooftops at every sort of learning disability special interest group meeting about what you guys are doing, and there's so much free CPD out there, and a lot of people are sort of like, oh, you know, I wouldn't be very good at assessing the knee, and I'm like, why not? It's, you know, all right, you know, if it gets really complicated, then refer on. But a basic assessment shouldn't be beyond any physio's core skill basis, and you can refresh these things at, you know, events like this.
Right. So, that's that competence piece again, though, isn't it? That's what's interesting, is that people find it, that because it seems intimidating to then think, oh, well, there's surely so many people that are better at doing that than I therefore don't need to keep that baseline competence. You know, I'm local enough to Joe Gibson to think that I should, as soon as someone presents with shoulder instability, should I be punting them to Joe straight out the gates, or should I be competent at that level to then make sure that I only send a certain percentage over to Joe if I'm really struggling at the top of my skill level? I imagine it's not a dissimilar thing, and that's why I do find your work to be such an interesting proxy for so many of those sort of reformative conversations that sort of seem to be resonating with so many people. Sorry, go on. I did interrupt.
No, it's fine. It's interesting to hear you say, you know, it's a consideration that you have, is, you know, should I be able to see this person competently before I refer on? And we talked earlier about the fact, you know, the referral onto an LD specialist for a really complex case. But it seems at the moment that most people just automatically see LD and go and just, you know, pass them straight across without any second thought and without any attempt to engage. Now, again, as always, we're generalizing, so it's not necessarily everybody, but more often than not. And I can pull up the stats if I really want to, and it's not good reading. In fact, I'm surprised we've got so many followers on social media, because most of it's doom and gloom. But I think the puppies probably help.
No, you toe a good line with that, mate.
That's all I've got, mate. So yeah, in terms of what, you know, as a delegate, and I plan to be taking in as much as I can at Therapy Live. You know, I'm doing some work at the moment in the background with Elaine Miller, Gussie Grips, and the Royal College of Nursing special interest group around pelvic health,
right?
Specifically for people with learning disabilities. So I'm really interested to learn more about the menopause with Ellen Griffin. That sounds really interesting to me. And then another thing that I'm really looking forward to is going to be looking at Uzo doing his climbing shoulder. Where I work, we're very lucky to have an outdoor activity centre and climbing wall. So I'm really interested to see, and I've seen some of his social media posts around climbing. So we're looking very much at how we can incorporate climbing within our therapy sessions.
Right.
So yeah, but there's tons. I mean, you could spend days just looking back through streams.
But this is why I'm glad I asked, because I just, you know, if someone insisted that I answered the question I just posed to you and had to hazard a guess as to what would Ali be doing, I wouldn't have thought of those two sessions, because again, I'm trying to work it out, but I'm probably not realizing just how versatile, especially because there's so much of it, how versatile those sessions would be depending on the context of which you need them, which is good. We've got a couple of questions coming, and then what we're going to do is we're going to leak your new website, mate. I'm really looking forward to it. I've just clicked a few buttons, and I think we're going to be able to do a bit of a share screen. To give a spoiler on that. But these questions that I really wanted to come to. Jo Turner said that she's slightly embarrassed to say that to her knowledge, not had a learning disability patient present in private practice. Are we making our services inaccessible or off-putting to learning disability patients? And I would second that, actually, Ali. I don't think we've had any in here, and that concerns me. But then I imagine there's a few different reasons. But what's your take on that?
Well, so there are an estimated 1.5 million people with a learning disability. That's a conservative estimate in the UK. Yeah. There are also about 1.5 million staff employed by the NHS. Now, how many of us can sit here and think, how many NHS staff members have we seen throughout our career? And I'm sure most of us can put a hand up and say, I've seen someone from the NHS. And but not somebody with learning disability. And then you sort of think about that and think, well, actually, that's really bizarre, isn't it? Because people with learning disability statistically have a higher number of comorbidities as well. If anything, we should be seeing that 1.5 million even more than we do.
Overrepresented, yeah, okay.
Exactly. They should be overrepresented, but they're not. They're really not. So, and I think Jo should definitely come and listen, because it's one of the things we're going to touch on in Therapy Live at 9:15 in the public health stream. But yeah, seriously. So I think how we structure our clinics from the very start can set up barriers. You know, if you don't send out information, so if you don't send out accessible information or information that's, you know, in a format that people can access, then that's going to reduce the likelihood that somebody's going to want to engage. If you're not flexible in your service, so, you know, you may within that information that you send out, then, you know, one of the things you could have is you could put on, you know, we recognize that people may have additional needs, as stated under the Equality Act. We want to try and support those people. If you can make us aware at the point of referral or the point of contact of those things, we can then make adjustments forthwith. And so that you're not then blindsided as a clinician, that somebody rocks up to your clinic and all of a sudden has got a complex learning disability or brain injury or whatever, and you're going to need to, give us double session for. And that's going to mess up the rest of the schedule.
That's the thing. I think you've mentioned to me before, it might even have been on this show, whereby it's also that there might be that there's a learning need that you would make a double session because that initial contact needs to be longer, but that doesn't necessarily then need to sustain. I think it's you that said that before. Once that impression has been made, it sometimes can unlock more access to normal service care provision. What I wonder about the private practice piece as well is that there is then the raw economics of it, or the likelihood of accessing particular sectors, and I think that. Am I right? I don't want to be complacent by bringing that variable up, because I don't think that's the whole piece. But I imagine that is a chunk of it. Is that to some extent, for some obvious and some less obvious reasons, there is less cash in those pockets, and for various complex political reasons, means that they will need to use public sector services more than they would their local private practice for something that emerged. Is that a my instinct somewhere right on that?
On the whole, yeah, you're pretty spot on. There is a strong correlation of lower socioeconomic factors that are associated with the community of people with learning disabilities, and there are a wide variety of reasons for those, which we haven't got the time to get into today. But on the whole, yes, it's less likely that you'll be seen in private practice. However, there are people who have funding who see specialist private practitioners in their own homes and go to special clinics. But as a general MSK practitioner in outpatient service, you would probably, you're less likely to. But I still don't see that as the reason that we shouldn't. Is that also because people don't know that they can access these services? If you've got a learning disability, is the only way that you know that you can go is to go to your doctor? Is the only way that you've got an option? Is you can't go to the, I wouldn't go and think I'd go and see you guys, because I didn't know that you support people with learning disabilities, or the education of the information that's out there is only that I need to go down an MSK, an NHS pathway that might, leave me 6-8 weeks down the line before you pick up a referral. And if it's something serious, we talk about knowledge of red flag pathologies amongst the general population. Knowledge of red flag pathologies which present with people with learning disabilities is even worse.
Yeah, of course.
So it's almost nature rich situations than chicken and egg.
A really good point. Really good point. I've got a question here from him. I can't seem to pull it up on screen because I think it's coming through Insta. But Emily asks, is there a challenge because there are few rotations in LD? That's what she's asking. Is that an issue?
Yeah, I mean, I know there are a fair few community services who have tried to really get back onto the rotational posts. And I know Derbyshire, they've just taken some new rotational as part of the Band 5 rotations. And I think people get a lot from those. One of the challenges is that there are, of the Learning Disability Physio Specialist Interest Group, there are 300 members, around about 300 members, 350 members at the moment, for a population of 1.5 million, conservatively.
Yeah.
And the economics of that,
another reason why it's a necessity for us to try to therefore upskill. It's a bit like we've said that with the pelvic health stuff, is that what is the end game? Of course, we need to make a case for more specialists, but also why not make competent generalists? And it's not dissimilar there, is that we need to try and do a bit of both. And also, it can't fall on the shoulders of those 300 to have to take how many students, how many juniors. I mean, it's just not sustainable for them to have to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought I was doing good taking 5 students this time, and then you had to come and blow me out the water with your 500 or whatever it was. So yeah, we do try our best, but
from me, I promise.
Limited resources. Yeah, so they're just not enough, and they're still being eroded away. And I know of there was 3 positions I heard of last year in local regions where people had left and posts weren't backfilled. So I think again, we need to get better at making the case for our own job, which is why I've become a more public out-facing physiotherapist, to try and, number 1, educate, and number 2, shine a light on what it is we do.
Sure, absolutely. Well, your nemesis on the stream war, I give you a hard time, Alistair, but I love the message you put out there. Clearly a nice guy and excellent physio. Annoying.
Thank you.
I love that. So for those that haven't seen those hashtag wars, then please do engage, because it's important for us to try and work out exactly how you guys are intending to behave as delegates. So many of you, you've got so many sessions to choose from. Are you going to pick a stream and sit tight and then get some of that content in series, or are you going to be jumping around all over the 10 streams of education? I'm fascinated, so please do use hashtag Therapy Live to give us any insights that you can. Now, I did say that we're going to try to give talking of insight. Let me see if I can try to show you Alistair's new.
Come on, Jack, you can do this.
No, it's open.
For everyone listening to the podcast in the car, this is great.
Oh yeah, great audio. Is that working?
I can see your screen.
See us Inception. It'll be Windows in Windows, Windows in Windows. Is that now working? Where it's
That's
showing?
the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, look at this, right? So this is Al's new website. And so
it's at the end of development right now, but yeah, it's not quite live yet.
Talk us through it. So I suppose one of the things is, why did you feel it was a necessity for you to have a centralized place for your resources?
I think I believe that I've mentioned this before, that there is a psychological hierarchy within physiotherapy. You touched on it in the MSK circles, and I think even within physiotherapy as a profession, learning disabilities is quite low down. So I wanted to give credibility to learning disability physiotherapy, because I don't think there is that much, and referring people back to my social media is all well and good, but then when me and Liz are engaged in a dance battle, and she's getting embarrassed all over the place, and there's pictures of Jack with his pants doing a pole dance. It's not quite the professional credibility necessarily that it could be. And so I wanted to create a platform, first and foremost, that gives credibility to the cause, and also is a bit of a hub for information for practitioners. So there's stuff about me on there, but that's all what it is. There's some blogs about called John and Al. John's my older brother, who's got Down syndrome, and is sort of the reason behind. But if you go on there, there's also a page on there, Tough Topics in LD, which is a little podcast that I do, which explores. It's a podcast primarily for professionals within learning disabilities, but the idea is that it's equally applicable outside of that, and you can get those on your wherever you get your podcast from. And then also there's a section in there that has got information that is around what are your legal obligations as a practitioner, somebody with a learning disability. What are your how would you build communication? How would you overcome these barriers? So that's kind of the raison d'etre. But essentially, rather than referring back to somebody with a social media page, which has got good information on there, but it gets lost unless you're Dave Poulter. So it's now you've left me. Thanks, Jack. So yeah, hopefully that will be up and live before we finish. Before Therapy Live. So I will let everybody know on socials what that website address is. I don't know how I would go about finishing this or putting any fancy outros on. So yeah, there'll also be some information on there for people with learning disability and families of people with learning disabilities, so that you can go on there, and some links to external websites that I think are really, really useful tools in order to engage people with learning disability. So he's back.
I'm back. I didn't know I did. Sorry about that. It was up on my screen. I'm glad you mentioned it. So I haven't done a runner. Promise. Is Schumacher, who's telling me he thought I'd like to know. As far as I can tell, I was there nodding along with trying to join in. So yeah, I'm glad I'm back. So I didn't leave you hanging to do the finish. Thanks so much. One thing I sort of hinted at but haven't mentioned is that Al's going to be helping to bolster our moderator team for Therapy Live. So he's going to be in the Physio Matters frame. One of the things we really wanted to do is make sure that because we've set it up so in such a structure that each session is technically back to back with another. If you imagine that one of the moderators having to close down one session and then rush over to another, they've not managed to sort of orientate and introduce themselves to the speakers and stuff, then everything would feel a bit frantic. So we've wanted to make sure that no one of our moderators is needing, or speakers is needing to go from one session to another within a few clicks in a moment. And so therefore we're trying to call upon a little help from our friends to just try and tie that over, so that then we could try and make sure that it's going to be fast paced through the day, but it needn't feel frantic and scrappy, and hopefully the professionalism that you've come to expect of our last couple of shows, rather than sort of a bit manic on that first one in June. So that's what we've done. We've tried to make sure that we kind of bolster the team, but with some of our faves. So Al, you've got a busy day ahead of you in many different ways.
I look forward to doing Liz Bailey's session, and moderating that one. Yeah.
Is that? Yeah. We'll see what we can do. Try and put you on to Liz's session and stuff, which should be fun. Especially that's one way you can win the hashtag war, isn't it? Is if you sabotage our session, she'll be scared now.
Exactly.
Thanks so much, mate. Really appreciate your time as ever, and we'll speak again soon. Please, if you haven't already, then do register therapy-live.co.uk. Get your tickets now before they're gone, and also just make sure you join up bright and early in the morning of the day. I've got the intro. I've just been putting some slides together for that. I won't hog too much, but we've got walkthrough guides for how you can orientate and plan your day. But if you haven't seen already, the program's out, so you can start seeing people printing it out and highlighting bits and pieces. So quite excited. It's imminent now. So next Friday, Therapy Live, the 11th of June, and I'll see you tomorrow for 9:15 for Ali's session. Yes, in the
public health 9:15.
Final plug from him. But yeah, for now, bye from me, bye from Al, and I'll see you tomorrow for more Chewing It Over.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.